And we're going to end next week with the ultimate teaching of Francis in mirror image of Jesus, which is the teaching of love in various forms. But so far, what stood out for you in our St. Francis discovery? Something new that you've learned, or something that you were been chewing on for a while?
One of the things, Andy, was Pastor Dave's quote that was attributed to St. Francis: preach the gospel at all time, and if necessary, use words. I love that.
Yeah. So that's an interesting one, and he didn't ask my input on that, but he was pretty happy. He felt pretty good about using a St. Francis thing. I said, right. Good though. No, that's good. But one of the things they said about it, it's one of those contextual and perhaps apocryphal statements in comparison to the Dominicans, who were all about preaching, all about teaching, and we're trying to get the gospel or the understanding of faith out to people in a way that the church wasn't. The church was concerned with dispensing the sacraments. It's alien to us, perhaps, but their job was to dispense the sacraments faithfully. And so you had a priest who was to remain holy, so that the holy priest could then dispense the sacraments, and then they would then convey their gifts of God to people. People didn't need to know very much about Moses or Elijah or Abraham. They just needed to know that when you're a baby, you get your original sin washed away, then you take communion, and then you are confirmed in the faith. You can take holy orders, you can get married, you can eventually make sure that you receive extreme unction or the last rites, and then you're all in grace. In the meantime, all the way through is your confession. So the priesthood really didn't have much of a teaching ministry. It just dispensed, it regulated and dispensed out these sacraments. Think about it as a medical, like one of these like minute clinics. It's just there to keep responding to that. So the Dominicans were preaching and saying people need to know. People need to know about the Bible and faith. And Francis is in that tradition too. I mean, St. Francis sends people out to teach. He sends them out to preach. I think that why that particular phrase became synonymous with him was that the brothers always balanced their preaching with their action.
That's the important thing.
Balance, so it's in the sense that Dave used it, it's absolutely correct. That is, more likely are we to convince others of the validity or the value of having Christ if we live it out in our lives. That's undeniable. But where you run into trouble is you do have to tell people every once in a while where you're getting your joy from, where you're getting your strength from, where you're getting your hope from. Just to be a happy, hopeful person and never to say I get that from Jesus, well, it may never lead to anything. So I think always words, but words in the right context and the right timing, instead of the very first thing, which can turn people off. I'm sure you've got many people that you've been part of their life, and it wasn't immediately, but it came later, that they said something about, oh, that's right, you go to church, don't you? You're getting that from somewhere, right?
Maybe what makes me, the story is, hasn't changed at all. The people who demonstrate most visibly or speak most loudly about Jesus and live the life as close to that as possible. A lot of people think you're crazy, or they get angry at you, or they think, you're in it for something. and, you know, it's like I have a friend who thinks that I only believe in Jesus. I only go to church so I can do bad stuff and I won't have to worry about it. I'm like, hey, wait, I wish I could. I wish I did.
Isn't that amazing? That tells you more about them than about you.
Burden is still there, though. I mean, it isn't easy. It isn't easy to be to demonstrate your faith. I mean, we don't have to be him. It still isn't easy today, you know.
No, that's good though. We'll get St. Francis out there on another Sunday morning. I'm going to be doing my message on Francis in May. So we'll get another swing at Francis then too. But then at some point in time, I probably better give Francis a little rest or people are going to accuse me of being a Franciscan.
They'll want you to leave your home.
Yeah, I'll be wearing that brown gown.
I'm looking forward to the haircut.
Yeah, the haircut's good. So we talked about the animals last week, how the wonderful sentimentality of Francis and the animals is much more than that. It's really a true understanding of incarnation, that God is continuing to be present in the world, as opposed to paganism, which says that the animals and the rocks and trees are spirits. Rather, it's the Spirit of God in imbuing them with life and vitality and enabling them to proclaim God's glory. So the creation becomes an easy book to read of how God is continuing to create, continuing to be a part of our lives. So that wonderful insight into incarnation, and most dramatically shown when he develops the idea of the nativity, and he gets credit for that. As far as we know, I don't think anybody's disputing that, which makes him remarkable. And just unfortunately he wasn't able to patent the idea, or he'd have left behind quite a fortune there. But definitely Jesus being incarnated, far more interesting to St. Francis than it was to, again, the church at that time, which was more concerned about Jesus's victory and Jesus's ransom or sacrifice for us. And not that those have to be excluded from each other, but the incarnation. So incarnation is necessary for Good Friday to matter. If you don't have incarnation, then Good Friday doesn't matter the same way. Martin Luther King had a Good Friday, but he wasn't the incarnation of God. So his death is instructive, his death is laudable, his death is inspirational, but it doesn't take away sins. Only the incarnated one could be the one that would actually be able to do that. So the incarnation is so important, and still a boon for us, because people like Christmas. So the wonderful memes that I've seen around Christmas, which can really be used very much as a sermon, is where you've got the baby with the shadow of the cross over the manger. That's pretty powerful. That's pretty amazing, that kind of juxtaposition. Good. And we've done the Dr. Dolittle thing. We've done what else? We have the visit to the Sultan, the peacemaker. Any further thoughts about that? There is a movie, St. Francis and the Sultan. I don't know which streaming service offers it, but you might want to, if you feel like it, you might want to dig it up. St. Francis and the Sultan. If you do, let me know where you find it. I hope to get a chance to it seems like it's relatively new. It's always interesting. The story's basic, but it's always interesting to see what the director will do with the story. What's their extra that they're putting to it.
Andy, going back to when Francis talked to the animals and had, his connection with the animals. I was watching a documentary about Nikola Tesla, and Tesla was pretty eccentric, needless to say. He basically lived in hotels most of his life, and later in life, he lived in his hotel where he was like on the top floor, and he'd go up on a roof, and he made friends with the pigeons to the point where he talked to them. And there's one pigeon in particular that he claimed was his wife.
Okay.
When that pigeon died, his life it went downhill after that. So
Wow. Oh my goodness. Tesla. Great. All right. Well, we're going to look tonight at the sort of the ending point is going to be two fascinating pieces of St. Francis's life, but we'll build up to it. The two big things that we're going to look at the very end is the fact that the followers of St. Francis testify that he received the wounds of Christ, the stigmata. This stigmata is something that he receives, and subsequently there have been other saints that have been testified that they had received it as well. It's one of those things that has been investigated a lot in the sense of, could it be other causes, because of course we're very rational people and we don't want to be caught with snake oil. So we kind of think about what rational causes, and there's great ideas for the rational causes, everything from him receiving leprosy in those places, especially, and that being sort of noteworthy, that he had the leprous spots in his hands and feet and probably elsewhere. And a few have claimed that St. Francis died of leprosy, which is very possible given the symptoms. So that could be it. It could be that he, did the wounding himself in an OCD kind of way. It's possible that he caused it, and then there certainly have been some questions about some people. The wound on the side is rather extreme, and it doesn't seem to heal, which is also again, you have to take the follower's word for it. St. Francis understands what he's received, and it makes a huge difference to him, but he doesn't make a big deal about it. It's more his followers. The other thing is that he shares with the world this canticle of the sun, or the canticle of the creatures, this being a beautiful canticle that is quite unique, and it becomes a sort of a beginning poetry for the Italian language, and many trace back the Italian language and it's in an art form to that very canticle, which is fascinating. So he gets kind of credit for that. No one has any real doubts that he wrote it, and what he writes is very very interesting in any era, to see what he thinks about in his writing of this canticle. So we'll get to those, but I want to start with the some of the places where we want to go in his life, so that you have a sense of how he gets to that point. The first thing would be to share, that's of course a beautiful mosaic of the Canticle of the Sun. You've got some of the things that he ends up speaking to in the canticle. First, we should note that St. Francis experienced a significant eye affliction in his last 5 years of his life, I guess. It's very likely he got it in Egypt when he was doing his peacemaking mission. It's a very common enough eye ailment in those areas, and it's very likely he brought it back. They had no particular skill with that affliction. I think it's called trachoma, and it still exists today. One treatment that they thought was just surefire was to take hot iron and put the iron rods around your eye. And so they would burn his skin. And it is said that he, the Pope sent his best guy to do this to Francis, his best guy. Thank you. And just before he's afflicted or he's given this, you know, horrific treatment, which doesn't work, he speaks to the glowing metal and he says, "Be kind, brother fire, to me, be kind to me." Said that he did not call out. Of course, that would be very much what you'd expect a saint being able to handle the pain. But it didn't work. And so he became less able to see as time went on until he was probably blind at the end of his life. That's a sad thing. You're talking 40 something, you know, not later in life. The next thing that happened was this concept of Lady Poverty of Francis, which goes back to his early days. We want to revisit. St. Francis was for some time a wannabe troubadour, someone who was enamored with the French musical, touring, traveling minstrels. And most of the music of the French troubadour age is very gallant and very, very romantic. And it had a style of chaste love. So you were absolutely, this would be like a 6th grade boy who says he's going with a girl, but they've never gone out, right?
Yeah.
It's this kind of like my beauty, my love, my heart. Have you ever talked to her? Oh no, I could never dare, you know, approach her, you know. So these songs are all very steeped in that idea that a consummated love would be like terrible. Like there'd be no reason for the song. I would say it's when Jack, I want to say in Cheers, finally, is it Jack that gets together with Diane finally? And it's like Sam and Diane. Sam and Diane get together and the show falls apart because, like, you know, it was all about them not getting together, you know, all those years. And it's kind of funny. They finally said, well, I guess we got to get them together. And oh, show's boring now. But anyway, St. Francis has this style of affection for women, and sings about it. And then when he converts, he seems to convert and create a new object of affection. And this is this idea of the affection he has for Lady Poverty. So she becomes a persona for him. It's so fascinating. I'm not sure he creates her entirely in the sense that he's the only person to call her Lady Poverty, but certainly the way it's expressed, he's fallen in love with Lady Poverty. Well, Lady Poverty is just a way of saying the life of denial, of sacrifice, of chastity, obedience, all those things that the minstrels, the troubadours sang about women in that era. He starts singing about the life of poverty, the life of sacrifice that is found. And here we have this wonderful picture. There's Jesus kind of putting them together. See, he's got their, you know, that's even better. It's almost like he's putting a ring on her finger. So Saint Francis clearly loved poverty, sought it out, and lived in it, and suggested it was the way to freedom, that true love, true life could be found in being poor, as he imagined Christ to be poor, as the one who had no place to lay his head. And as he saw Christ being poured in his suffering, the suffering servant. So Lady Poverty becomes, I don't know, it's just it's another way of expressing his piety by attaching himself to her. He has a story where he meets her, and he says, I'd like you to spend some time with us. And she spends time with them. She'll say, for example, take me to your home, and he says, oh, I'll be happy to take you to my home, but I don't have a home. We sleep out here under this lean-to. And she says, that's wonderful. I love your home. Give me something to eat. And he says, well, we will have to go begging for the food in order to eat. That's what we do. And she says, that's delightful. That's the best meal I've ever had. So she proves their worth. Now, the reason I bring up this whole thing with Lady Poverty, and I don't mean to make him sound like silly in this. I mean, this is a way of seeing the world of chivalry converted to a chivalry of poverty, a chivalry not of glory, but of sacrifice. And he pours his love and his energy that he would have put in one direction, over in the other direction. So this becomes for him the ideal. This is the ideal, to be in love with the sacrificial life. Weird?
Yes.
What do you think, BB? You're a psychologist. What's going on here?
All right. I have this, I don't know, I have kind of a fixation with this thing of giving up our material things. I'm not a good one at it, but there's a couple things I wrote down today that I sent to my daughters. It says, it is easier to be grateful for what is given than to be wanting for what is not. One or the other becomes a way of life. And then the other saying is, until we know we have enough, nothing more can be added to it.
Wow. Okay.
They're powerful statements. In my, I'm kind of fixated on this I don't know why.
Well, I think that there is a time in life where I hear people saying, those kind of things. And I think that's a great maturity to reach, where you don't need much. I get a kick out of my dad. He's pretty far along the Alzheimer's progression. And my mom was really frustrated today. She said she was supposed to pack him up so I could, move him. And she said, he doesn't want to take anything. I thought he's like St. Francis. He doesn't want to take anything. This guy has a great financial portfolio. He's got all this possibility for stuff. And I could not find things to take with him. He has nothing to take. Except that they traveled the world, right? And he said that to someone, that's his possessions.
Yeah.
He served his church. He had a great career. He's been a good father, grandfather, etc. I mean, but when it came down to it, my mom said, I wanted to send his Rolex with him, but I don't even know where the Rolex is. And darn it, because that would have been, I wouldn't mind the Rolex, honestly. I'm not going to buy one, but my dad had one. So, I mean, think about it. No, I don't need anything. So I'm packing up. I packed 2 suitcases and a couple pictures to put on the wall. And I'm like, that's it. That's it. It can be done. At the end of your life, it's going to be that way anyway. So.
Well, in my 20s, I wrote that book, Packing the Hearse, beep, beep. I mean, so I've been pondering this a long time, but I don't do anything about it. I'm getting ready to go on a family cruise here. And I'm trying to get down to 50 pounds of luggage. You know, I'm really the opposite.
Well, sometimes we're fixated on the things that we can't do, and but yeah,
Just take what you can put in the box.
Right. Oh, man. You see, Southwest allows 100 pounds, so I never go anywhere without 100 pounds of stuff to break your back. But I'm trying something new. We'll see how this goes.
wow, you don't even weigh 100 pounds.
Oh,
Yeah, it's interesting to travel. Like you have to sort of steel yourself for the fact that you might not impress a whole lot of people on your trip with your outfits. Is he still wearing that shirt? Didn't I see that on Tuesday?
oh.
So anyway, St. Francis's love for Lady Poverty is long. So that idea of the love of suffering, the love of emptying and sacrificing. But the problem is his followers are not so in love with Lady Poverty. In after a decade, 15 years, you know, a decent interval of time, some start to say, you know, we're really glad that you guys either go around in bare feet or sandals, but you're in Italy and we're in Bavaria. And we're finding it very hard to get around in barefoot or sandals in Bavaria. So we need to modify the order here. Or, you know, it's great, Francis, that you really don't think people need much in the way of books. You're not, St. Francis is not fond of books, but, you know, actually, you know, we want to be able to keep up with the teachings and the things and you know, knowledge and scholarship, and so we want, you know, to start, you know, having books. And then they say, well, it's great, you know, Francis, that you want your people to sleep outside or in simple huts or caves. He said, but some of us just really can't do that, and we're finding it hard to get recruits that will do that, and so we're going to start building some places to live in. And I know you say, Francis, we're not really about having our own churches, but, you know, everybody really, you know, if you're going to be anybody, you need to have a church, and you know, so we need to start doing some of those. So anyway, particularly when St. Francis goes away to the pilgrimage and to meet the Sultan during that sojourn, he comes back and finds that some of his buddies have been busy. Not only have they modified the order to allow some of these things to occur, but they've also started to actually build nicer churches and buy books and use money, which he was really against money, completely against money. Fascinating, like aversion to coins, you know. It reminds you of Jesus saying, render to Caesar what is Caesar's. But I don't know which of these guys who's who in this, but I do think it's interesting. They're, you know, they don't look like they're suffering too much. And there's long quills. They're editing, maybe they're editing the order of Francis. And the question is, are they reasonable? And you can watch some of the Franciscans argue this to this day. One of the Franciscan guys that I like, who's kind of a young guy, talks about how his ministry is to do YouTube videos on Catholic teachings, and he's got a great following, and it's probably something needed. I've watched on half a dozen of them, and they're great. But he says, I have to have cameras and lighting and sound and an editor, and I mean, I can't do this without technology. If it was barefoot and sandals, you know, then I wouldn't be doing this. So the question is, you know, constantly argued over, you know, are you being faithful when you take another step away from that original vision? The same thing happened with Luther. Luther, like, people started to, do more with Lutheran teachings than Luther would have wanted. And I think you'd find that true with a lot of people who start movements, that the next person they give it to or move it on to extend it in directions where they would not, the founder would not have been interested.
Andy, in this picture, Andy, the guy on the far right has a shoe on, and the guy on the second from the left in the dark outfit is barefoot.
Yeah.
Maybe that's St. Patrick, and that's his rebel.
Yeah. And then we've got the book right in the middle of the whole, look at the whole thing is aimed toward this book. Now, is that the book of the order? Is that the Bible? Is that a breviary, which was a book of Catholic prayers? But definitely St. Francis gets so discouraged by these changes that he goes into a depression. He leaves, he resigns as the leader of the Franciscans and goes off to a cave, actually goes off to Sister Clare's church and kind of like mopes in a lean-to up against Sister Clare's church. And it's said that it's wet, it's cold, and he's bleeding from his side. His eyes are, painful and becoming very sensitive to light. He's upset about what's happening to his order, and the field mice running over his body. Oh man, out of the depths I cry to you, O Lord, right? It's so good. It's so, Francis, I think, to be so joyful in one minute and then to be, just, distraught. So he's reached this point and kind of wondering, what's it all about? And he still dedicates himself to prayer, maybe too much so. He's really preoccupied with fasting and these damp caves that he likes to go into. And he recounts later on that maybe he had not been kind to his body. And it's interesting, he talks about his body as if it was a brother or a sister. So my brother body, not me, but my body, that I might not have been kind to it, which makes it, you think, funny, that he could starve, I guess, his spirit, but he thinks maybe I shouldn't have starved my body like I did. Undoubtedly, made him weaker for these other illnesses. And you see pretty gaunt.
What is the thing floating? The little, is that a carving?
That's the crucifix. He's contemplating the cross, the dying Savior. He has a book. Let it be known, Francis had a book.
There you go.
Yeah. So in this terrible return to remember that prison he was in after he was caught in battle.
For the year, he was in it for a year.
Yeah, this is almost a recurrence. He's gone back into it. For those familiar with manic depression, you've got the ups, you got the downs. So here he goes. This is a spiritual manic depression. He was in Egypt preaching to a sultan one minute, and now he's in complete and total despair. But I think we can all relate. So, and sometimes that happens for me in one day. So I do think while we're in Lent to talk about fasting and prayer, probably the unfortunate thing for Protestants is that we're so concerned about the misapprehension of works that we've kind of dropped anything that smacks of works. I think it makes it difficult for us to support each other or to even create an environment where some of these practices might be, brought back. And I think certainly fasting is something that, we at least could consider. I think it would be something that I know that Pastor Will, they start the year with a fasting program. And I said to him next year, I know we don't need one. I know I can fast by myself, but it might be interesting to promote that at Advent and see, spiritually, if that was a benefit. The key is that it's not meant to be a work, but rather a offering. You're offering yourself and, experiencing the deprivations others experience, or just cleansing yourself, just letting go of things that you might not need, and maybe taking the time or the energy to focus more on prayer. Has anybody been successful in having fasting as part of their spiritual life? All right.
Yes,
Yes.
I have, and I had a problem in my life, also my family, and we are just fasting for 7 days, and that was miraculously God healing us. My sister, and she has a big health issues, and doctor said she would be die like 1 month later, like this, for the big health issues. We are just praying, me, my family, and some church member, and we have go down ourselves to God for 7 days. After 7 days, and the doctor said, and your sister's completely healed.
Oh.
That was miraculous. Yeah, and doctor says no need any medicine or anything. You should take your sister to the home, and praise the Lord God. And now she has the 3 children, and she is very fine. And God is so good, and fasting and prayer so good to changing very important thing. Yeah, praise the Lord God.
Praise the Lord. That's wonderful, Russell. Thank you.
Yeah.
Well, that's something we can be inspired by for sure. So we want to make sure that we don't take it to the extreme that even Francis admitted he had taken it, and perhaps find that whatever it is that might help us to empty ourselves. It could be a cell phone fast, if the cell phone's taken over your life,
Isn't
So-
the concept of Lent a fast?
it was a time of penance, and so to fast was seen that way. St. Francis would, and the monastic communities fasted on all sorts of days. So over the course of the year, many days of the year were days of fasting. Now remember, that doesn't mean starvation. It usually meant water and some kind of bread, or in some of the monasteries, it meant beer, that you drank beer during Lent.
Yes, good one.
And
You want to bring that one back?
yeah, I thought about that.
Yeah.
But the idea was that beer was a safe form of calories from wheat and barley, and so
And hops.
and the hops kept it all from going spoiled. So the idea, of the monks having their breaking their fast with beer makes sense, and you can see why they didn't feel so bad about Lent. I mean, it could have been worse, could have been something else. So, all right. So now he receives he's praying and recounts that he sees a seraph. Let me bring the seraph into view here. That these visions are often kind of hard to nail down, but it's a seraph like described in Revelation, the wings of an angel. You see the wings crossed, the wings, but yet he describes Christ. So it's Christ in the vision of a seraph, or Christ being held by a seraph, or something. But in any case, if you notice, from the hands of the Christ and the feet and the side, you got these laser beams shooting out here, and they correspond now to St. Francis in the same locations. And this is I can't remember this brother Giles, I think, maybe, who ends up recounting the experience. He's included in this. Again, these are not meritorious. This isn't meant to show that St. Francis was more deserving. He would argue against that. And certainly it isn't some kind of experience that we consider normative, but it is interesting. He doesn't receive a halo. He doesn't receive wings. He doesn't receive immortality. He doesn't receive superhuman power. He doesn't receive glory, honor, and praise. What does he get from Christ? Wounds, suffering. It's fascinating. I mean, of all the things Jesus could give you, right? See, give me suffering. And yet this is a turning point for Francis. He says to the Lord, explain this to me. I've suffered here now. My eye condition, my dedication to Lady Poverty is being disabused by my followers. I fasted long and hard, and now you've nailed me. You nailed me, and what's this all about? And Christ basically says to him in a voice, if all these things, if you knew that at the end of all these things, if you knew at the end of them that there would be glory beyond all telling, that these are only the things that you go through until you receive that glory, what would these things mean to you? And St. Francis realizes it would mean joy. For me to receive suffering knowing that joy awaits is joy now. And what an amazing shift now, that suffering is something that people can rejoice in experiencing. We see this in Acts when they're grateful to be imprisoned and beaten for the name of Christ. We see this with the martyrs in the first centuries of the church, who are the same. But we haven't seen much of this lately, this idea that suffering is redemptive. And we don't see it as prevalent in a church that's gone full majesty, full glory, full, I was watching a thing on medieval life and what it was like for peasants to work for on medieval properties. And what was interesting is the guy said, now don't forget, it's not just secular people that own these properties. The peasants also work for the church, and the church bishops show up and they see the condition of the peasants. They see that their life is not great. They even squeezed more out of the peasants. So the church itself wasn't just maybe irrelevant. It was actually part of the domination society that people lived under. The church was oppressing people. I think much the same that Jesus felt the Pharisees were doing, right? And the Pharisees are oppressing the poor.
Is this taking place at the same time as the Canterbury Tales were sent?
Canterbury Tales were before this.
Good question.
Because some describe the behaviors in Canterbury Tales that are made into little mini stories, and some of them just really, just this is what they were doing.
I think we can say after, because I believe there's a character in the Canterbury Tales that's a wealthy friar,
Yes,
a wealthy Franciscan.
so it was after that. Okay.
So I think, but maybe not a long time after that. So what's changes for him, and I don't want to suffer, and you don't want to suffer, and you don't want to see anybody suffer, right? If there's anything we don't want to talk about in modern faith, is some sort of redemptive quality in suffering. But look at where we are left, and I'm not a saint on this matter, but just look where we're left. If suffering is not redemptive, if suffering isn't sharing in the pain of Christ, if it's not sharing in the pain of the birth of what will be the new order, if it's not part of the labor, then what is it? It's the failure of God. It's the failure of the project. Suffering's an aberration. Suffering is at all costs to be avoided. And it's fascinating, at every effort that we make to avoid suffering, when we reach suffering on any level, we are excruciatingly affected. Right? We can't take hardly any suffering because it's all to be avoided. It's all to be avoided. And so, my goodness, it's sort of like I'm staying at this hotel and the bed's hard. Come on, people are sleeping in a cardboard box, right? Please, and yet we can so quickly, oh yeah, that's terrible. So I think where we might learn from this would be to say, one guy saw his suffering as the opportunity to share in Christ's suffering, which leads to true joy, true life, to see in the accidents and incidences of our lives, not God failing to provide us a good life, but rather a reminder that this is not the final say of God. This is just the birth pangs of what will come. I mean, how does that work in a hospice? How does that work? How do you talk about suffering?
Yeah, difficult.
It's to be avoided. It just simply means God's world failed. Or I get a lot of times, I've been good. Okay, was that supposed to wrap you in saran? Is that supposed to, protect you from kryptonite? Of course that's good. You've been good. Wasn't it great to be good? Isn't it just good to be good? Like a better life? It's not a bargain to escape suffering. And I say that again, knowing full well that if I'm going to talk to someone who is suffering, I'm not going to bring this up. I'm not going to bring this up and say, "Oh, rejoice." But I did go to last night. I was called upon for someone who died, and I went to the place where they died, and the family was rejoicing because she was now with her husband. I mean, they were laughing and crying. I thought only faith could help you in that moment, right? In that moment, you've lost a loved one, and yet they're all, all believers, they'll all be crying, they'll all miss her, but at the same moment, they could also rejoice because they knew the promise that was for her. I was like, wow, you guys are amazing. I better shut up. I have nothing to say. You guys are better than I am.
What
So
kind of condition was she in? That can also weigh on that.
Yeah, I mean, it's almost impossible to feel happy for someone before their time or who went through,
Yeah.
Something terrible. And again, they're far be it from me to try to explain cancer for, someone who's in their 30s or infant death syndrome or these poor kids today, the kids not only that were killed, but the kids that have been now traumatized. And believe me, be attentive to the trauma of these kids, because my wife is still talking to Parkland kids, with trauma. I mean, that's not over for them. In fact, the Parkland kids and all the Uvalde kids, all of them are going to go through it again tonight.
Oh, yeah. Yeah.
It's very hard to escape for them. Susan's they've got good therapy. But even so, it keeps, the wound keeps getting, the scab gets torn off. So this was the picture I used at the very beginning to advertise the whole thing. And I was wondering when I was going to get back to it. There is Francis gazing in absolute adoration, of the suffering and deceased Christ. And where does this come from? This death is saving Francis. This death gives to Francis not only joy on earth, but salvation forever. He's looking in a way that we forget to even imagine looking, in gratitude and in joy. And out of this joy springs this wonderful canticle, which, as I said, is a classic of Italian literature and is just super cool in its way of talking. And I'm just going to read it to you because I think it's worth it. Most high, all powerful, good Lord, yours is the praise, the glory, and the honor, and every blessing. To you alone, most high, do they belong, and no one is worthy to speak your name. Praise be you, my Lord, with all your creatures, especially Sir Brother Sun, who is the day through whom you bring us light, and he is lovely, shining with great splendor, for he heralds you most high. Praise be you, my Lord, through sister moon and stars in heaven, you have formed them, lightsome and precious and fair. Praise be you, my Lord, through brother wind, through air and cloud, through calm in every weather by which you sustain your creatures. Praise be you, my Lord, through sister water, so very useful and humble, precious and chaste. Praise be you, my Lord, through brother fire, by whom you light up the night. And he is handsome and merry, robust and strong. Praise be you, my Lord, through our sister Mother Earth, who sustains and directs us, bringing forth all kinds of fruits and colored flowers and herbs. Praise be you, my Lord, through those who forgive for your love and who bear sickness and trial. Blessed are those who endure in peace, for by you, Most High, they will be crowned. So the idea that all creation praises, that all creation realizes what St. Francis realizes, that God's gift to us is far beyond our momentary suffering, that it deserves our most attention, and that it brings great joy in knowing where we belong. We belong in a humble status before our Lord, but nevertheless, he exalts us and all creation. So you've got some wonderful images there. Now, at this time, we think he's been kicking this thing around, this song. Again, maybe it's been sung in different forms. He's starting, it's been something in a process. But now, as he reaches the end, he adds some stanzas, and I think this is chilly. Praise be you, my Lord, through our sister bodily death, from whom no living being can escape. So he adds sister death, that that despite what we might think, that she contributes praise to him, to God. How dreadful for those who die in mortal sin, how blessed are those she finds in your most holy will, for the second death can do them no harm. Oh, praise and bless my Lord, thank him and serve him humbly but grandly. There's like a million songs written about this. You can go on YouTube and watch them, including the Brother, Sun, Sister, Moon, Donovan. I think it's Donovan's song, which is good. But the circumstances of his life at this juncture could lead him to total despair, total, oh, woe is me, look how hard I've tried, I guess I'll give up. And instead, out comes this wonderful, cherished praise of all creation praising God. And so St. Francis leaves that for us. Any thoughts about, anybody heard the Canticle before?
First time.
I hadn't heard it, but go ahead, Pat. I'm sorry.
I'd say it's the first time that I've seen of it.
But there's words in there that are in songs that we sing.
Yeah.
Mhm.
Yeah,
Bits and pieces.
yeah.
Yeah, I hadn't heard it before, but I think when you look at it, there's such, to me, there's such deep thought there about all the different aspects of things that God gives us, right? I mean, there's the sun that warms us and makes things grow. There's the night that allows us to sleep and refresh. And they talk about the wind blowing and the water that we need and the fire to cook and heat. I mean, and the Mother Earth that gives us everything. There's so much thought in that just sit back and say, all these things that we see all around us are given to us by God. They're such great gifts that we have to sit back and just take them in and appreciate them.
The concept of this canticle, though, reminds me of the crucifix of St. Francis. It's pictures telling a story.
Where did these pieces of art come from?
Actually, I have no idea. Aren't they beautiful?
Yeah, I wonder if they exist like that or existed like that then. When were these made?
These look a little bit like more of a modern take, but maybe not.
The lettering would not look like, wouldn't be an
Right.
Yeah, I wonder if there's anything from the 15th, 16th century that depicts these things too.
Yeah, it's maybe some windows. I would think stained glass would be an ideal form for all of these.
Yes, it would be the same thing as we talked about before, is the fact that you use these pictures to tell the story.
Right. Is wind, water, fire, and earth, is that the 4 elements in the ancient concept of what the world was made of? So that's kind of cool. So he's made sure to include what the ancient world considered the the substance of the world, of the elements. But I think that death one is fascinating. That really tells that puts it all together for us. he can praise death and say that death is in fact a praise.
Well, recognizing that it is inevitable for the
Yeah.
human body, but yet praising it as a step to get closer to God.
I tell you, we can do worse than to prepare for our own death. We could do much worse than that. We've got to be brave and prepare for that. It's what a wonderful spiritual reflection for us, instead of avoiding it like our culture teaches us to think about it, or think about our end, think about our end. What, if our end goes this way, if our road goes this way, what happens? If our road goes that way, what happens, right? We're hoping that we've got it figured out, and then really quite unsure what to do with ourselves if it doesn't. It's not going to probably work out like we thought. It's probably not. So
And we don't get to plan it.
we don't really get to plan. We should prepare, smartly in a variety of ways. Yeah. But I noticed something for that I was surprised about for my folks. They've been living in what would be considered one of these premier communities. And I thought, of course, wow, how lucky they're living in this premier community. Every once in a while they would confide, my mom would confide in me. She says, people are very friendly here. And I thought, in the end, what is the criteria that you want for your life, and so it was really funny when she said, I think I'd like to move to Evans Square. I know the people are friendly there. I'm like, yeah, okay. That's great.
Oh my gosh.
I'm all thinking about, the granite lobbies and the wear your jacket to dinner. And I'm thinking about Glenn. Oh my gosh. My mom's going to be living with Glenn. If you know what I'm talking about, Advent Square, you know what I'm talking about, right?
Fortunately, he's a loner, so.
Yeah, it could be worse. But he's, but still, it's you don't know what people are going to end up cherishing. Is I don't know, something different than maybe you thought. And I'm really glad for that. So anyway, so any other questions about that? One more session.
I've got a question.
Yeah.
And I probably should have brought it up back when you were talking about him losing his eyesight. Did he lose both eyes, sight in both eyes, or was it one?
It was both, and I don't know if he lost it entirely, but it was miserable. It was some kind of a real incurable eye infection. So if you've ever had like pink eye or something like that, the pain that it can cause, it was like that. And yeah.
Okay, then I have another question related to that. The stigmata obviously happened after that point in his life, correct?
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So is that why this other brother was taking notes, or was the vision that he had evident to this other brother who was writing it down for him?
I would say,
I mean, that's what I'm wondering, all these things that you say that were written and he didn't have an eyesight, but
right.
Maybe somebody was writing for him.
Well, a vision does not necessitate eyesight.
Okay, that's what I wondered.
A vision can be an internal experience, but you describe it with images, or he could see well enough. I don't know, but it's something that you've experienced.
Right. So then was the stigmata necessary when he couldn't see, or was it something that he actually felt? Do you understand what I'm saying? Was that necessary to have the scars if he couldn't see? Was it for others that happened?
Good point. I think it was for him. He felt them. The description of the stigmata was
Okay.
not that the ones in the hands and the feet, not that they were holes of like blood, but rather that they looked like the protrusion of the nail.
Okay,
They were they were hard nubs that looked like the head of the nail that had gone through.
wow.
And so now the side was reported to be bleeding and
Through
not
it-
to stop.
Was it through his hands or through his wrist?
It was through his
The palm?
hands,
Okay,
as far as we know, which again, scientists or forensic people today tell us that crucifixion took place through the wrist bone.
right, yeah,
But so one could say, well, if Francis was really experiencing them, then he should have experienced it through the wrist bone. If he was really experiencing exactly what Christ went through. But what St. Francis was experiencing was exactly what he thought Christ went through. That's what he thought Christ went through.
right.
And that manifested itself in him. That's one of those, I think the more you talk about it, maybe the less, I don't know, maybe the less is better,
Yeah, yeah.
in a
I-
sense that you don't want to take away its mystery. And since Francis didn't make a like, here I am, he covered his hands he wrapped his hands so people couldn't see it. It appears that just the one follower, several others at his death confirmed this, and but it does give him the understanding in the medieval age as the altar Christ, which is the other Christ. This stigmata confirms that he is sort of the Middle Ages Christ, which might sound heretical, but it's not meant to be heretical. It's just meant to say he's the most Christ-like of anybody who had come along. And if you look at, some of the other saints, he's not, I'm sure he's not absolutely unique, but when you look at what he was like, it's really quite powerful. And in some of these other saints, there's almost a little bit of a triviality to it. Some of their heroic deeds and actions, whereas Francis just seems to have really captured the spirit of Christ that needed to be, captured again. It really does. I know we talk endlessly about Mother Teresa, right? And I think that's a very similar example. It's like we need people to come along to be that example for us. And it might even be a mother in our life, a father in our life. It could be others who were sacrificial.
Well, and at that time, St. Francis was truly the antithesis of the Catholic Church.
Yeah,
Which,
you're right. He's definitely he's a prophet, not in word, but in deed. Just his life is prophecy, saying, hey guys, what are you really about? And in the success of the Franciscans is phenomenal. Even if we, say that all of them weren't quite as radical as St. Francis, they did continue to go all over the world preaching and doing ministry. There might not be very many movements other than the Christian church itself. That's one of the things that we don't really have, again, in Protestantism. I don't think really are distinct groupings of people. Maybe when they started, the Methodists were like that, but they didn't remain like that. Salvation Army, that may be a good example. Salvation Army, I don't know a lot. Does anybody know a lot about the Salvation Army?
Kelly Ryan.
Yeah. I guess it's a little, it's based on the military, so that's kind of, but I think that they are maybe more like the Franciscans in the sense that they have a clear identity. It's fascinating.
They haven't changed.
No. All right, y'all have a good evening. And
You too. Thank you.
I want to thank you all. I hope it's been fun for you. It's been an absolute pleasure to have people to talk about this with. And we'll enjoy our next session, and then we'll figure out maybe something for next fall that maybe we can dig into. Okay.
good.
God bless.
Thank
you, Andy.
you.
Thanks.
Bye now.
Bye.
Right here.
Right.